Welcome to YouTube channel 24. My name is Anastasia Noritsyna, and Boris Pinkus is with me today. Mr. Pinkus, hello, I am glad to welcome you.
Good afternoon, my dear. Thank you. Glad to be on your channel and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Of course, we will discuss the election race in the United States, how it will all affect Ukraine, but I can't help but start with Biden's withdrawal from this race. You have predicted this repeatedly, but I wonder if this was expected for Trump? After all, earlier his entire company was built against Biden. And if we take the results of polls and what they say in America in general, who has more chances now? Kamala Harris or Trump?
This is a very good question. Of course, I have often said that Biden will withdraw, and so it happened, but he remains president until January 20th next year. This is 6 months, my friends. Every day is precious for Ukraine and for Israel. You know, today is the first day of the war in Ukraine, February 24th, 2022. And Israel has been in the same boat since October 7th last year. The United Front Line, which is fueled by the chief strategist, the architect of these wars, both in the Middle East and in Ukraine, is Putin. And, unfortunately, the Biden administration is so sluggish, indecisive, not fixated on helping Ukraine win, until it wins completely. And despite the fact that the law was adopted on April 20th this year with the allocation of $61 billion, the new law is based on a new strategy to help Ukraine until its complete victory. This does not happen to this day. This is the whole trouble today when Biden suddenly announces that he is withdrawing from the race, but he is not leaving the post of president, that is, indecisive support for Ukraine with the constant condition not to escalate, not to provoke, not to pit the two nuclear powers against each other. They remain in force, as they were from the first day of the war in Ukraine to this day. That is, this is a mockery of Ukraine, this is sadism. When you see how you seem to help, you seem to pretend to help, and enjoy how the victim of the barbarians bleeds. You know, this is a crime. And what will happen? For example, everyone has a question. What will happen if Harris wins? And here you know what is most frightening. There is a growing wave of those who are ready to bring Zelensky and Putin to the negotiating table. This is the worst thing. And these conversations come from the mouths of great friends of Ukraine. The most obvious example is Boris Johnson, a great friend of Ukraine, there is no doubt about it. And suddenly, after the meeting, we saw Trump, I think, come out and say, well, it would be nice if we froze this front line on the date of February 24th, when Putin's aggression began. And, in other words, to leave these occupied territories for Putin until February 24th, and the rest to Ukraine and continue to help Ukraine arm itself. I'm shocked, I'll tell you directly. But for all that, you know, as they say, Plato is my friend, and the truth is dearer. There must be no concessions, my friends. If you give up a finger, they will cut off your hand. If you give a hand, they will cut off your head. It's the kind of terrorist law that Putin is, by no means, I'm afraid. You know, I don't believe Trump will do that, for a lot of reasons. First of all, despite the fact that it was frightening who Trump chose, the Vice President, Vance, who was against Ukraine, against helping Ukraine, one of the top senators in Congress, who was against the allocation of $61 billion, I will tell you frankly, we are not happy about it. I will tell you frankly, they are absolutely not happy. Who are we? We are the Reagan wing of Congress, in America as a whole. There are more of us than them. You know, there are more of us than the Republican Party, much more. And, nevertheless, there is good news. For example, the same Vance just a few days ago said that the occupation of Ukraine is unacceptable for America. This is the expression he expressed. This is very important. That is, we have hope that he will change his mind, just as he has always changed. For example, in 2016, he called Trump a fascist. And yet, when he was asked how it is, now you are suddenly elected by the same Trump, as your vice president, and you show loyalty, devotion to him, and you once called him a fascist. So he says, yes, Trump managed to convince me. I realize that Trump is different. He is right. I stand on his side. That is, it speaks of a person's character, which can change. This is my reference to the fact that just a couple of days ago he said that the occupation of Ukraine is unacceptable. This says a lot. On the other hand, remember, my friends, vice presidents are never involved in foreign policy issues. I exclude Dick Cheney under Bush, an exceptional case there, but in general the vice president prerogatives are an internal problem. Plus, Trump is an egoist. He will not allow someone to decide on foreign problems. He will decide himself. He's a decision maker. That's the most important thing. Plus, despite the fact that Trump says that he can resolve this issue in 24 hours with one call, and nevertheless, I do not believe, I hope so, that he will go against the bipartisan unity of Congress, primarily those Republicans on whom he relies. And who is this? Three Mikes. Mike Rogers, chairman of the Arms Committee, Mike McCall, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Mike Turner, chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Three Republicans who are the architects of this new strategy to help Ukraine until complete victory and allocate $61 billion in aid to Ukraine. So, Trump is talking to them today. I'll tell you good news. Just yesterday it became known, but we are constantly lobbying in this regard, despite the fact that he disobeyed us and did not take Nikki Haley, a great friend of Ukraine, as vice president. And yet, the good news is that he has added Mike McCall, a great friend of Ukraine who has been to Ukraine, to the team of advisors today. I have just mentioned his name as chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. And, most interestingly, Mike Pompeo. The same Pompeo who was once a congressman, then became director of the CIA, and recently for all 4 years he is the only one from Trump's entourage who worked with him for all 4 years as Secretary of State. He is a great friend of Ukraine. He has been included in the list of advisors. I emphasize this, Trump's advisors. This is very important, especially since we continue to lobby that if Trump wins, I say if with a stretch. Why? Because there is no great confidence that Trump can win. I will tell you a little later why. So, we are lobbying for Trump to take Nikki Haley as Secretary of State and Michael Pompeo as National Security Advisor, instead of the Dunce Sullivan, who periodically puts pressure on Biden to end the war in both Israel and Ukraine. So we are lobbying and we have a chance.
на Байдена с тем, чтобы тот заканчивал войну как в Израиле, так и в Украине. Так вот, мы лоббируем, и шансы у нас есть. А теперь я вернусь к реалиям. Каково соотношение между Трампом и Харрис? Кто из них может...
And now I will return to the reality of what is the relationship between Trump and Harris, which of them can win. So this is the choice of Trump-Vance, who is young, energetic, intelligent, educated, but at the same time far from foreign policy problems, who does not understand that today Ukraine protects our American national interests on distant borders, that Ukraine is America's bulletproof vest, that Putin hates not Ukraine, but America, that Ukraine has stood in the way of these barbarians heading to Europe, and then to America.
Ненавидит не Украину, а Америку. Что Украина грудью встала на пути этих варваров, на пути направляющихся в Европу, а потом и в Америку.
That's what he doesn't know, he doesn't understand. This, of course, embarrassed us. It hit Trump's chances of winning.
По шансам Трампа победить.
Why? I will repeat it again. The fact is that it is impossible for anyone to win today, neither Democrats nor Republicans, without the help of competing voices, other, independent ones.
Конкурирующих голосов, других, независимых.
Let me remind you, we have 42 million registered Democrats, 36 million Republicans and 32 million independents.
Республиканцев и 32 миллиона независимых.
So, today, more than ever, the votes of the independent will be decisive. I have November 5th. So, Trump chose Vance, unfortunately, did not give the independents the opportunity to make a decision in favor of Trump. This is the whole problem. Therefore, again, we regret to say to Trump and his entourage, why did you not choose Nikki Haley? After all, it is this that prevails over Trump to this day. You can't imagine, from 17 to 25% it now prevails over Trump on a national scale.
Boris Yakovlevich, I apologize. The Atlantico writes that the nomination of Kamala Harris could break Trump's plans altogether, and he may now change his vice president, D. Vance. Can this really happen?
To be honest, the owner is the master. If he wants to, he will do it, unceremoniously. There is no doubt about it. The trouble is different. Will he want to? Therefore, we put pressure on him now, on all the pedals. I'll tell you honestly, he will regret his choice. Very sorry. You understand, we are not just about some kind of personality. We are talking about the party. The party must win. We have a different strategy, different approaches. We are for the end of the war in Ukraine. The sooner the better. In favor of Ukraine. Do you understand me or not? We are in favor of Ukraine, not only Ukraine, any country fighting for freedom and democracy, to be able to defend its borders, universally recognized by the world community. We must not set precedents, we must not allow some maniac, a bandit from the street, who has gained access to nuclear weapons, to blackmail and conquer other countries. If we allow Putin to do this today, it will be done by the same China easily, and by the same Iran that sleeps and sees. It will destroy Israel and even Saudi Arabia. Why not? Iran dreams of being a leader in the Islamic world. You see, many other things can be like a chain reaction around the world. Therefore, Trump must understand the responsibility that falls on him. I think he understands that. A small example for you. I am very glad that Zelensky spoke with him on the phone. They were both satisfied. Now what do? We are lobbying for Trump to go to Kiev. Let him go, see Bucha, Irpin, Izium. Let him see for himself.
Will he go to such cities? Or will he just come to Kiev, talk to Zelensky and leave? Won't he want to watch this devastation?
No, if he comes, he will definitely visit these places. There is no doubt about it. We have such a program, we are pressing. And we want to. He won't go alone. I think our friends will go with him. Yes, this is McCall, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, a very important figure. Sorry, calls come from Ukraine one after another. I just want to say that we expect him to go with Ukraine's friends from Congress. This is very important. If he goes, we put pressure on it. I think everything is going to this. He has no choice. He is beginning to realize today that with the arrival of Harris, his chances have diminished. Why? Because we will have another problem on our agenda on November 5th, which may even be decisive. This is a problem with abortion. The fact is that Trump is in favor of abortion bans being adopted at the civilian level. Moreover, he says that before 15 weeks of pregnancy of a woman should have the right to terminate a pregnancy. After 15 weeks, as soon as there is a pulse, fetuses, and so on, it's immoral, it's against religion, and so on and so forth. But the trouble is that women's voices are very important in our country, to this day, women, who are overwhelmingly against Trump. But Nikki Haley has a more liberal position. She says, "My friends, I am a woman, I have a daughter, I am also in favor of limitation, in the unlimited actions of women in terminating a pregnancy at any stage." But by giving some restrictions, we must at the same time give a woman space so that she can choose whether to terminate the pregnancy or not. This is important. And this position gives millions of women the opportunity to support Nikki Haley. This is very important. Therefore, if he had taken her as vice president, he would automatically have received tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of women's votes in his favor. This would increase his chance of winning on November 5th. This is not yet the case. This is our whole problem. Therefore, the appearance of Harris, it is terrible for both Ukraine and Israel. Why for Ukraine? First of all, Harris is not even Biden. She is even worse than Biden. Why? If Biden is in favor of somehow balancing between the extreme radical right wing of the Democrats and the moderate Democrats who are for helping Ukraine, then Harris is entirely on the side of the right, radical progressives. This is the trouble. In other words, their goal is to stop the war today in both Israel and Ukraine in order to come by November 5th as a party of peace. This is terrible. This is what scares us. Therefore, we are proud that the Republicans have a different platform, I mean the overwhelming majority, and at the same time we want to be sure that Trump will announce his position on Ukraine today, without getting off with general phrases, not to mention that he will solve it with one call, and so on. We need specifics. This is what we expect from Trump today. Therefore, I return to the question of a possible visit by Trump to Ukraine. We really hope that he will go, and this will also help Trump understand who we are dealing with today and what Ukraine's role is in the future of America. This is what we are counting on today.
If we talk about Trump's visit to Ukraine, when do you think it can take place? Is it possible just as the Democratic Party convenes to officially announce Kamala Harris as its nominee?
A very difficult question. Everything will depend on the reactions of this or that ethnic group, primarily such groups as African Americans, Latinos. This is very important, and, of course, independents. Today, a number of institutes, every day there are calls, and I personally received from several institutes with surveys, and others, I am sure. Thus, polls will show the vector of Trump's popularity in our country. Of course, he will be terribly busy. August 19th is the first day of the Democratic Convention. By this time, they must determine, first, their vice president. And they are also dizzy for this position, they do not know who to stop at. On the other hand, there are many opponents against Harris in the Democratic Party itself. They say she's not the kind of person who reflects the majority of Democrats. That's what they say. That is, within the Democratic Party. Now that's interesting. In other words, the turbulence is terrible. Not only inter-party, but also within each of the parties, as I said, between moderates and progressives within the Democratic Party and in our country, between the Reagan wing and the rabid conservative wing. True, there are much fewer of them than there are of us. And yet, Trump has yet to speak openly about how he intends to solve global problems, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East. But I have no doubt about one thing, he will not be able to go against the will of the American people. The good news is that just a couple of days ago, a little-known, however, institute was announced. It is not Pew Research, not Rasmussen, for example, not Gallup. A little-known institute conducted polls and says that 70% of Americans today are in favor of rigorous assistance to Ukraine until complete victory. A couple of months ago it was 62, today it is 70. This is on the one hand, and on the other hand, do you think Trump will go against the will of bipartisan unity in Congress, which will give assistance to Ukraine until complete victory? This cannot be, it is excluded. He will not have any support from us. We will simply condemn him, because Ukraine and Israel are unthinkable problems that must be solved in favor of the peoples of these countries. No aggressors, no terrorists. This is what we have on our agenda today. Therefore, my friends, I understand that the Ukrainian people are very worried, especially since there are contradictory messages from their entourage, Trump himself, and especially with the appearance of Harris, the one who can be nominated at the convention as a candidate from the Democratic Party, who, unfortunately, does not shine with her experience at the political level and, of course, frankly, her horizons. To this day, she has not expressed a clear vision of her on the issue of providing assistance to Ukraine, but we have suspicions.
But we see that Trump is now very actively starting to oppose Harris, and he said that she is evil and stupid. He said this in an interview with the New York Post. And it looks as if he is doing it on purpose and as if, on the contrary, he is afraid of her. Why exactly such attacks? There were not even such attacks on Biden, if you remember what he said about him. And you say that Trump will not make any concessions. And why then are there so many such statements in the Western media, in the American ones?
But there were several reasons for this. The very first reason was given by Orban, who met with Trump, then came out and said, "Oh, we are in the same boat, we understand each other, that we need to go to peace, we need to make some concessions." This was the first bad message from Trump's entourage. The second, and quite significant, statement by Boris Johnson. It has also greatly influenced the minds of Western leaders today. And yet, Trump, for all his unpredictability, will not act contrary to our national interests. Remember this, my friends, it will not be. I remind you again, the majority of Americans are in favor of helping Ukraine, until it is completely victorious, plus Congress. Without Congress, without help, without the support of our Republicans in Congress, Trump is zero. He will not be able to accomplish anything. Money and laws are in the hands of Congress. And if so, it means that he will be dependent, he cannot act arbitrarily. He can't. We have never had this in America before. And in general, those who know our history, remember, we still have a democratic country, thank God, we have 3 branches of power. We haven't had since the birth of our country on July 4, 1776. Since then, it hasn't yet. Today 46 President Biden, for the 47th to come a president who became a dictator, spat on the decision of Congress and said, listen, today will be as I said. This will not happen. It was not and will not be. The people will not allow it, Congress will not allow it.
As for the attacks on Harris, why this kind of rhetoric?
Of course, despite the fact that Nikki Haley addressed us, the Republicans, a couple of weeks ago, and said, guys, get ready. Biden will leave, and then another will come. Any other Democrat will have an advantage not only over Biden, but even over Trump. Harris's first advantage is her age. On October 20th, she turns 60 years old. She looks younger, I must say frankly. Okay, that's one. The second is her past. Do you know what the Democrats are motivating against Trump again? The fact that he has 34 charges, that very soon he will be sentenced. It will be in September. And even though Trump has already announced that he will appeal, yes, he will. Within 30 days after the verdict, he has the right to appeal and protest. That is, the case will be transferred to another level of our judicial system. And this will take months and years, even to this extent. In other words, it will be set aside, and the electoral process will continue from September to November. So, and nevertheless, it gets into the heads of ordinary people. Look, who will you vote for? For a criminal who has 34 charges. He's a liar. He was even called a fascist by Biden himself. Moreover, he calls us, the rival party, extremists. Do you think the assassination attempt on Trump was accidental? No. It's the atmosphere, the polarization, the suggestion to young people that you don't have a future, that there will be no democracy with the advent of Trump. This will lead to such excesses, to such tragedies as took place on July 13th, when Trump miraculously escaped. Therefore, Trump today, despite the fact that Nikki Haley called on us, especially Trump and his entourage, to be ready to fight against a new opponent, a new candidate from the Democratic Party, who will have an advantage, unfortunately, it was not taken seriously by Trump, as you know. And this choice of Vance of his, it shows that he did not understand then who he could deal with. So even though Trump's approval rating seemed to have jumped after the tragedy and, you know, luck on July 13th against Trump, despite the fact that his rating jumped, his choice of Vance negated his advantage. This is the whole problem. Therefore, the chances, I answer the main question, the chances of Trump defeating Harris, and, most likely, she will be the main nominated from the Democrats, Trump's chances of victory are small. And the advantage that it has today, from 3 to 5, is within the limits of the arithmetic error. This is the worst thing. Now, until November, a lot of water can leak. And everything depends on how circumstances will pass in the political, economic and other spheres of the human sphere, both in our country and abroad. Meanwhile, our enemies are in a hurry, very much in a hurry, first of all, Putin. He is in a hurry, he wants to quickly grab from Ukraine. He is afraid of Trump, terribly afraid. Afraid. Why? Trump burst out. A month ago, I would have used a bomb against Putin. These were Trump's words when he compared himself to Biden, and he can.
Now Putin is afraid of everyone. He did not expect Biden to leave. And he himself said then in an interview with Carlson that Biden is beneficial to him, because he sees that Biden cannot put Russia in its place. Time writes that Trump is likely to cut aid to Ukraine and force Zelensky to agree to a peace agreement that is heavily skewed in favor of Russia. The first 8 or 10 months and, in fact, the whole of 2025 will be very difficult, a Ukrainian official told this publication, and at the same time, Ukraine is now counting on the help of its allies in Europe, but also on the military-industrial complex of the United States of America, which can make huge profits from the continued production of weapons for Ukraine. Well, we understand that if Trump comes, he comes for 4 years. Just what guarantees are there that after this period Putin will not start a war again? Well, that is, will Trump take Ukraine into NATO?
First of all, I do not believe, and not only me, but many of us, that Trump can do this. Any concession to Putin is America's concession and America's defeat, an admission of defeat. Does it mean that the 54 countries that are part of the contact group, the so-called Ramstein group, led by America, cannot defeat one charlatan? Tell me, then why live in this world? Why the hell do you need such greatness, self-praise? We can do this, we are in space. Well, tell me, where is justice? Who to believe? How much can this hypocrisy go off the scale? And I don't think Trump can do that. He's a different kind of person. Believe me, it can't be like that. If we give in to Putin, then we are yielding to China automatically. China is no less terrible and evil of tomorrow than today's Putin. There will just be a chain reaction. Understand, this is not only about Putin. Putin is one of the links in the chain. This is the axis that is clearly visible today. These are Putin, North Korea, China, Iran. This is such a chain. And today, if we do not besiege Putin, if Trump does not do it, then the chain will grow. All this is the beginning of the fall of America with all the ensuing consequences. Therefore, I rule it out. As for NATO membership, my friends, I, for one, believe that despite the fact that NATO today, is already an organization that has long been in need of reforms, and this is taking time, we need to make sure that this agreement on mutual assistance and security signed by Zelensky and Biden at the G7 in Italy is carried out.
Нам надо бить на то, чтобы вот это вот соглашение о взаимной помощи и безопасности, подписанное Зеленским и Байденом.
It has not yet been adopted at the legislative level in America. We need this to be implemented at the legislative level at any cost.
Нам нужно любой ценой, чтобы это было имплементировано на законодательном уровне.
Then it will become law. then it will not depend on any president who will be in the White House tomorrow. The law has been passed, and it must be observed, just like America is helping Israel. Regardless of whether there are liquid conservatives or liberals led by the local terrible parties who are ready to go to any lengths just to lose the values for which Israel was created, the same is with Ukraine. Therefore, my friends, remember, today we need to hit what is more accessible, that is, the Congress. And given that today the Republicans are in the majority here, in the lower house, and the Democrats, we have no reason to worry that with the arrival of Trump in the White House, much will change. And we began to talk about the need to include Ukraine in NATO. I believe, and I will repeat my thought, that given that NATO is still bureaucratic and in need of reforms, we need to focus more today on the fact that these agreements on mutual assistance and security between Ukraine and America, signed by Zelensky at the G7 summit in Italy, should be ratified at the legislative level. Then we will have no fear that America will not help Ukraine. On the contrary, this should be done as soon as possible, especially since in Congress, in the lower house of Congress, in the upper house, in the Senate, there is bipartisan unity in the need to provide assistance to Ukraine. We need to do this, we need to promote this issue, the sooner the better, and that would be great. We would have no problems in the future, who would come to the White House, how he would make decisions on providing assistance to Ukraine, no problems. Just like in the relationship between Israel and America. America has always helped Israel, regardless of who is at the helm of the state.
Boris Yakovlevich, thank you very much for this conversation, for finding time for our broadcast. I wish you a good day and thank you again for supporting Ukraine. Let me remind you that Boris Pinkus, public figure, president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club, was in touch with us. You, friends, support the conversation, put your like, write comments, and, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you all for your attention. Good news and see you.
Спасибо вам большое, дорогие, и слава Украине, мы победим. Другого у нас нет.